So Mick Pond, good morning.
Hey, how are you?
Man, what an honor, Mick Pond. I got to tell you, I know that we've never actually met in person until today, but I know I've been watching you from afar. I know you know David. I know you know a lot of different things that we've done. But man, I can't thank you enough for taking your time out of your busy day. I did 24 years in the Navy myself. So of course, when I retired, you know, you could take the sailor out of the Navy, but you can't take the Navy out of the sailor. So I'm still actively watching. And man, Mick Pond, I got to tell you, from an outsider looking in now, what a humble leader you are, man. And I got to tell you that you're just that way. So thanks for your time.
If you don't mind me giving a little bit of a preamble, Dave Deary, who I see is there with you, or somewhere else, he's there virtually with you, has been an amazing friend over the years, and I have been a horrible friend back, especially in the last few years, just being inundated and swamped with phone calls and texts and the triage of daily life. Even this morning, he sent me a note thanking me for doing what I really should be doing, which is reaching out to people. And Dave is the example that we should all be trying to be like. He's not about fanfare. He's about just quietly making a difference. And I have not been the kind of friend and shipmate back to Dave that I should have been. And Dave, I'm sorry, man. I'm going to try and make more time and figure it out. It's just, especially the last few days, it's just been crazy. But, you know, that doesn't excuse 2 years of not being able to make a lot of time for you. So sorry, man. I'll make more.
Well, Mick Pond, I appreciate it. Don't let it go. It's all good, because I know what you're doing out there, and what you're doing out there is a lot more important than ever responding to my texts. It's kind of like when you let somebody borrow money. You don't ever expect to get it back. When I send you a note, I know you read it. Just know that you're thought of, prayed for, and encouraged. Don't feel bad if you don't respond, brother. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, Mick Pond, look, I've got, I know a lot of people have been looking forward to it, and I think and I hope that we have a lot of people that maybe aren't in the military or even the Navy. So let me make this very clear. Russ Smith is our current Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy. He is our senior most enlisted leader in the entire Navy. Man, to get where you are and what you've done is no short feat. I've looked at your bio. You've been everywhere from the desert to the aircraft carriers. You've pretty much done it all in a pretty short order too. So congratulations on all your success. So to kick things off, I like to ask sometimes one of the most important questions any leader can ask. All right, and I'm sure this is on everybody's mind. So it's going to take you a while to think about this one, but I think everybody wants to know, what do you think of garden gnomes?
Garden gnomes are very, very, very critical to the health and safety of our gardens. Without them, which our crops wouldn't grow, and farm to table would not be possible, frankly.
Well, I appreciate that. Obviously, Mick Pond, that's just to kind of lighten the thing, because we all know you're in a crazy position right now, and I know you're dealing with a lot of different challenges in current times. So I want to steer away from that for just a second, because what this whole panel is about teaching people about leadership and how they can give more tools to the toolbox. So in the Navy, let's talk about current events. My understanding is, since I've been out, one of the things that the Enlisted Leadership Foundation does, we want to be here to complement military leadership programs that other services have. And I understand that y'all in development of a new one. Can you tell us more about the new Navy Leadership and Ethics Center?
Yeah, well, it's not new, but we have expanded exponentially the size of NLEC in order to help us professionalize and deliver the content of the leadership courses that we deliver early in a sailor's career. So the PO3, PO2, PO1 selectee leadership courses that we used to have, which were delivered with inconsistency all around the Navy, depending on time and space and requirements, were delivered to varying degrees of efficacy, absolutely, never efficiency. we decided that we had to do something different. And so Wes and I started this, and Wes took it on when I moved over here and has crushed it with the way that he and his folks have come up with this system and gotten it out there into a usable model. I mean, he took this idea, this concept, and he absolutely made it reality, where the courses were refreshed, and those will continue to get better. But we did the basic refreshment that had to happen. But the most important thing that had to happen was the time and the delivery had to be consistent, because that wasn't happening. Come to me and my CEO says, "Hey, I want to frock these guys. We just got the message today. I want to frock them on Monday." No problem, sir. I can take a 3-day course and shove it into 8 hours because I'm just that good. And we convince ourselves it's the right thing to do because we want to take care of sailors instead of really taking care of them, which really means setting them up for success by giving them the tools and the talent, or taking advantage of their talent by giving them the tools and abilities to do their job, and take the time to sit them down and actually walk them through what they need and do it in the 3 days that was required at the time, so they could actually absorb the information, debate it, discuss it, and really take it on board. So those high impact, short in duration courses needed better and more consistent delivery. And that's really what our expanded team at NLEC is doing, is they travel around, they visit folks, and they train the trainers, which does two things. One, it ensures that consistent delivery, but it also helps generate the discussion about leadership topics. You don't just have to discuss in your work center on a daily basis the world's best baseball team, the Nationals. You can also discuss things like leadership. You can discuss things like, what you're seeing playing out, frankly, right now on TV and in the media, and have a productive discussion about it and about leadership instead of your favorite car. That doesn't mean that you can't have personal discussions. And in fact, there's a huge aspect to being personal with your people so that they know you to be human, and you can relate to them and they to you. But, talking about leadership more often at the deck plate level, and relying on or using these things that we have available to us as training tools is absolutely essential. So the efforts that they're undertaking, one, like I said, standardize the product and ensure a consistent delivery of a better product, which is better for the sailor. It also decoupled it, by the way, from the frocking requirement. So we're no longer tied to that. There has to be a hook because human nature is what it is. And some would never go do it if we didn't have a hook. But having a hook ensures that it gets done, but we don't couple it now with advancement. We say, get it done where you can reasonably within this, your unit schedule. And this gives them the freedom to do it when they need to do it. And it also, again, generates that discussion in the mess, which is where it really should be discussed robustly. But that should trickle out into work centers and shops and everywhere else. So, and I don't mind addressing the elephant in the room so much as to say this: you're watching a very, very good discussion or example of leadership from all sides playing out right now in front of you. And my stepfather, who I love to death, used to say to me, the worst thing for you to have to be is to be me someday. And when you get to a position like this, you realize, as judgy as you were when you were younger, and how the perspective you think you have because you've read a Navy Times article, or you've heard an NBC News report, or saw something on CNN, for all those things that inform your opinion, you have to recognize there's probably a whole lot more you don't know. And unless you are fully informed of the facts, unless you are the investigating officer or reviewing the investigation, having an opinion should be understood to be just that. You should have an opinion, and you should discuss what you see, how we message things, how we do things. That's good discussion about leadership and about leadership tactics and how does this play in the field. We learn more from doing, and whether it goes right or wrong, than we do anything else. And you can learn a lot from a bad example of leadership. But to sit there in the wild and think that you know the whole story and then take a side is foolhardy. And it requires some trust in the organization to say, I recognize there's more I don't know than I do, and I'm going to leave it to them. And maybe at most, the thing I would say is not, you guys are crazy for doing that. It's, hey, I'm curious, why did you do that? And at all hands calls, those are the best engagements I have with sailors, when instead of standing up and saying, this is crap, why won't you let me have a beer? They say, hey, I'm curious, what sort of, analytical discussion went on, because we know you did one, went into not allowing beers, which we can then explain it and say, hey, I'm glad you asked that question, and ask that way, because it shows that you want to know more. You're not being critical with about 1/10 the information you should have in your pocket if you're going to be critical. So look at today and what's going on, and I'll leave it there because I won't answer any questions when we get to that about those things. There's a lot to be learned from what we're watching play out right now. And I would advise to just take it in, stay out of the fracas, because at the end of the day, CNO and I talked about this last night, and then I just chatted with him a few hours ago. And he said, are you worried? And I said, no, because I've got this, and I've got an interview with Naval Institute at 1300. And I said, I'm not worried at all, because from an enlisted perspective, we have the easiest job in the world. None of this stuff playing out has anything to do with us. Our job is to do our job and focus on the mission, which for most units right now, we have over 90 ships at sea. We have 4 carriers at sea, all operating virus-free. We have hundreds of CBs out there that are turning facilities into hospitals, commercial facilities into hospitals. We have thousands of medical professionals that have descended upon the island of Manhattan and New York's 5 boroughs to serve in over 11 hospitals and truly put themselves in harm's way, all with the idea that we have an obligation to our nation. As much as we do the defense of it, we can serve within it and do just as much good right now. And there are so many good news stories going on. As enlisted, we do a job, and that's what we're here to do, and stay away from the politics and the other stuff that you see out there. So I said, I think our job is easy. And as long as you don't get distracted by the noise, it's just that, it's noise. The rest is pretty simple.
Oh man, McPon, needless to say, that is the elephant in the room. And, I think all of us have tried to field that question and that opinion. And I think you couldn't have hit it more dead on the head. And I've always said, look, there's 3 sides to every story, right? There's his side, her side, somewhere in the middle is the truth. We don't know the truth. So I think that we just need to kick back and wait. And so thank you so much for taking your time. I know that's a very polarizing question that's out there. And, and I think it's an important one. So with that being said, I understand I caught you for about 15 more minutes. Is that about right?
Yeah, I've got 20 to 25, somewhere in there.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I want to dive into a little bit more more leadership questions as a whole. I think you answered the kind of elephant in the room that are more Navy specific, but with your experience of over 30 years of leadership experience coming through the ranks, I realized that you joined about 4 years before I did. So my first question is
trying to make me feel old. Congratulations, it's working.
Well, the difference is that, I've got the gray hair, we both have our challenges with it. Well, I've always said, it can turn gray, turn, blue, it can turn polka dot, as long as it don't turn loose, but that's another story. So with that being said, describe a time in your career that you took a leadership position when you did not have the title of that leadership position. Because we all know that's a challenge in leadership, right? You're now you're the top dog, right? So I've always said in my career, my mouth always outranked me, but right now you are. So
I always laugh. Sorry, I always laugh. I don't want you to mischaracterize. I give advice and counsel to the top dog. That's my role. I have no authorities. Mike Stevens used to say this a lot. He has no money. He has no authority. He has a staff of 7, and his job is influence. And honestly, that's why it's a lot harder, because your job is influence. It's not top-down direction. It's not linear authority. The fleet master chiefs, the group of 5, the G5, as we refer to ourselves, those 4 fleet master chiefs don't work for me. We have a collaborative finesse relationship but we each work for, I work for the CNO. Fleet Jim Honay works for Admiral Aquilino. Fleet Rick O'Raw works for Admiral Grady, and so on. And so those relationships that we have, there's an implied understanding that we are supposed to get, through the use of finesse, this incredible and amazing thing called the Chiefs Mess, 31,000 chiefs and about 6,000 reserve chiefs worldwide to do great things. But it's not the same as linear direction. And it's important to remember that, because it can be misunderstood. It's always funny when you speak to foreign navies. When I was in Russia, and they're like, so you're like the XO of the command? It's like, no, we have one of those. I work with him too, or her too, to give advice and counsel, but no, that's not exactly my role. And when I don't even bother trying to explain to civilians when they ask, what do you do? Oh, you're in the Navy, yeah. I'm really just Amy's husband. But when I try to explain, I just say, I work on the Navy staff. I give advice and counsel. So,
well,
sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent.
No.
But
Look, Russ, it just reaffirms what I said from the beginning, that the image that you portray as a humble leader, and that's a great example of where that comes from. And I think that's really that kind of the core value to a great leader. So back to my original question though, in your career, have you ever had in a situation where you had to step up and lead, even though that you didn't have that quote unquote title? Because we all know people, set to titles in the Navy. We have LPOs and chiefs and everything else. But have you ever had to kind of take a step up and take a leadership role, even though you didn't have the title?
When I was a first class on Carl Vinson, I had a guy who was not necessarily working well with the chief, and that chief was getting frustrated. And he called me in after I'd been there about a month and a half, and he said, hey, I think I'm going to make a switch. I'm going to make you the LPO. I said, do you mind if I work with this guy a bit? And I can do a lot from the 2 seat, and I don't need to be the LPO to finesse and get results. Because, if you remove him, you're going to end any chance he has of being a chief. And I would rather not see that happen if there's just some communication barriers we can work through. And he said, fair enough. You better, if you're going to help him, you better get in there and start swinging. So I did. And unfortunately, he was incredibly resistant to help. And I talked my chief, Tom Boynan, who's a bit of a legend in the IS community, 3 times I fired him. And he called me in one night and said, I'm going to make this change tomorrow. And either you're going to be LPO or IS-1 Brosius is, but I'm done. And I went, okay, all right, I got it. I walked him through what I had done to try and help him. Similar situation on my destroyer as the CMC. Had an XO. The second XO I had was not exactly super awesome. And the CO was just, fit to be tied. And I was frustrated because the XO I had when I got there was absolutely amazing. Commander Jake Douglas was phenomenal. And he just retired as a captain. Great guy. And I reached out to him and said, hey, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I sure love some tips and advice on how to relationship build, because I just want to help this guy and set him up for success. And I'm struggling with a way to build a bridge to him. And what I didn't know was he had not turned off his Yahoo email to his BlackBerry. And I saw a noticeable change in the XO's behavior the next day. And I figured it out, because I'm not dumb, after about 3 days. He responded. He gave me some gouge. And I don't know if I should be admitting this on camera, but I waited until we pulled into. We pulled into port, and I managed to wipe that BlackBerry and erase the personal account from it. But later, when I was leaving the ship, he was like, I read that email and I didn't appreciate that. I said, if you read it, you would see that I was taking responsibility and saying, I'm failing him and I don't know what to do. I need help. so that I won't fail him and I can build a relationship. You would see I was reaching out to get advice on how to help you and do better by you. I wasn't saying you suck at all. I'm sorry that you took it that way, but if you reread what I wrote, you would see that I was trying to help, and I was willing to say that this is my fault because I am the ambassador of goodwill. I'm supposed to be the authority on relations, you know, and I'm supposed to be able to do this like the chief, and I'm not getting it done, and results, not excuses. So what help can you give me? And if you'd have read it for a minute and not let your own ego get in the way, you'd have saw that. But there was a lot that I had to do, and the CEO had to do to work around that dysfunction in the XO. That was difficult.
Wow. Wow. That's great insight, McPon. I appreciate you sharing that. And again, that's where I really want to encourage that all of our speakers. I really want this to be authentic, like grassroots kind of conversation. So David, you understand you have a question for the McPon?
Yeah. Hey, McPon. You know, I just want to circle back real quick. You had talked about just the value of communication and how important that is. And that's something that in all of our programs, we really believe that leadership has to start with communication, because it's through communication that you're going to build those relationships. Because without a relationship with those that you work with, it's really hard to build trust. And until you can build that trust, it's going to be hard to lead. So at what point in your young career do you feel that you started, I mean, clearly that example you gave, you had established some trust as somebody who could, you know, work second fiddle. But, you know, how can an E4 or an E5, you know, we talk about, you don't always have to be in a position of influence to learn how to lead. In fact, you had commented about bad leadership, and I would submit you can learn more from a bad leader than a good leader. It's really easy to identify what somebody's doing wrong. It's really hard to identify why a good leader is a good leader, because so much is about how they make someone feel, you know, part of that organization, part of that team. So if I am not in a position to lead, or I'm not the work center super, the leading petty officer, the first sergeant, whatever, if I'm just a young E3, E4, E5, what can I do to start building my leadership roles and how, and the kind of leader I want to become? Can you speak to that?
Sure. So first of all, I don't think there's any such thing as just a young E3, E4, E5. They are all positions that, as you assume them, especially for petty officer third and second class, we read a letter, we talk about increased authority and responsibility and accountability, and those all mean something. They cannot mean something, but only if you surrender that back. And I think that when I made third class as a WT in in W division on Abraham Lincoln, so did everyone else. So there were no seamen. And I remember making the comment once as I was grousing about it, it's like nothing but an overpaid seaman. And now, soon to retire this July, Captain Gary Martin, who was my LPO, snapped me up and said, "Hey, expletive, let me explain something to you. And you need to understand that you can allow yourself to be an overpaid seaman, or you can be an awesome third class amongst a whole bunch of other awesome third classes." And that talk really stuck with me. And he gave me a lot of great advice, and I learned a lot from him. And I'm grateful that he's going to let me speak at his retirement. He made me understand that leadership isn't something that just comes to you, that someone walks up one day and says, "Here you go, here's some leadership, go knock yourself out." You have to prove that you're worthy of it. You have to look for opportunities to exercise it. And if you look for them, it really doesn't matter if you're a seaman, if you're a first class, if you're a senior chief, if you're an ensign, if you're a lieutenant commander. There are all kinds of places to lead and be followed. And all you have to do is look for them. And they're usually the things that no one wants to do. They're the things that no one wants to get involved with. They're hard, they're nasty, they're inconvenient, they take time. They're all the things that work against the work-life balance that we talk about so much. And when you demonstrate the ability to get in there and just do it, and then walk back to your boss and say, here, I took care of this for you. What else you got for me? Not look for, the transactional leadership of quid pro quo. Can I get something for that? But just go, I knocked that out. And because I like to jump, I want to jump over another box. Give me another one. And then you do it. And then pretty soon you get seen as the one who's the go-to one. Hey, every time Deary comes to me, that dude he delivers. Let's give him another one. Let's give him another one. And then pretty soon you become the example we want others to be like. So you get thrust into some sort of position of responsibility, and you get the opportunity then by position to actually do it.
And I really appreciate that. And I want to, there's one example you made, and I don't want to just gloss this over, because I think it's really critical. You said when you made that comment that your LPO grabbed you up by the short hairs. I think and you and I came into a Navy when if you're not being told you're doing a bad job, you assume you're doing a good job. And that's not so much the way people of current generations feel. And I still see sometimes it's easy to fall into that. And I just think it's important that when we recognize the good work that somebody's doing, because clearly that he saw something in you, or else he may not have, he may have agreed and not said anything, right? So I just think it's really important to give some assurance. And I think, that's one of the takeaways I just took from what you said, is recognizing the hard work that people are doing, letting them know. Man, I'll tell you, a pat on the back goes a long way, a really long way.
So another critical leadership lesson that you just touched on that we learned at boot camp, which is why we made so many adjustments up there, frankly, is that because I learned a certain way in 1988 at the world's finest boot camp in San Diego, California.
Hey, what's wrong with
that
Orlando?
That is not necessarily the way that sailors today learn. Every generation offers differences, not better, not worse, but different ways of learning, ways of reacting. And if we're taking in different raw material, you have to retool the factory to put out the same consistent product that you need. And we hadn't done that. We've been doing a lot of the same old things, combined with the fact, frankly, that RDCs had been repeatedly frustrated by this. There's this book, and I probably shouldn't acknowledge its existence, but I'm gonna. It's called The Book of Why, and it was this collection of emails and messages and good idea fairies that dropped these things on Great Lakes that said, "Hey, what a great idea! Let's put it in boot camp." Or, I understand that young people need 7 hours sleep every night to be healthy, so let's ensure that every single night they get 7 hours sleep. And when they get a congressional inquiry, instead of having the fortitude to simply answer the mail and say, hey, look, if I don't wake them up in the middle of the night at some point, when it happens on a ship, they're going to be like, wait a minute, I wasn't trained for this. And the whole point of boot camp is to enculturate them into the Navy. And so we weren't doing that. We allowed ourselves to be pushed into a box out of fear, instead of saying, no, there is a valid and time-honored reason for the things we do. And we are therefore going to get back to doing those, because if we don't, we are going to be grossly underprepared for combat, and we are not going to be ready when it's go time. The first time that a sailor is woken up at 1:30 in the morning and sees water rushing into their compartment should not be when it's happening for real. There should be some training that informs a sailor on, this is what I now do in this circumstance. And we need to put that primarily on the backs of the COs who develop their combat-ready teams at the deck plate level. But if we're not even giving them that enculturation into that before they come to the fleet, we're failing them. And we recognize that because we did it the way we vote. My favorite 7 words of the Navy. That's the way we've always done it. And we needed to make some adjustments. And, individually, leadership styles, I don't, Gary Martin was a very progressive leader. He's a very bad guy to use for this. But I had some other chiefs when I was working in Air Department on the Enterprise, my first ship. I wouldn't talk to my sailors the way that my chiefs talked to me, nor would we tolerate that anywhere. And it's okay to say we're going to do business slightly differently. One last thing on how things change, as you can imagine, especially in social media, retirees often play a large role in our forums. Some are amazing and incredible like you two and do so much to further the craft of leadership. And I can't thank you guys enough for what you do. But there's about 500,000 active or retired chief petty officers out there. And some of them, not the majority of them, not even many, but just enough, will get on there and say some of the most horrible things about this generation. And I had an interesting exchange with one, and he said, of course, you need more mental health because these goddamn soft peaches, they can't handle the stress of the day like I could. I was like, well, let me give you some perspective before you go nuts. In 1988, when I came in, we had 610,000 sailors and 600 ships. We were deployed about 29% of the time. 29% were out there getting it done. Today, deployed slightly more than that, we have about 289 ships and about 335,000 sailors as of about a month ago. So with just over half the people and less than half the equipment, we're doing more than we were in 1988 against the backdrop of supporting a land war and requirements gone off to support them, which has not made things very easy. So yeah, there's some increased stress on the force. Sorry if I keep straightening up. Admiral Richardson once asked me when we'd not been together long, why do you always like move around and grimace? I said, helicopter crash, my back is broken and I get really stiff. And the last few weeks have been so challenging, I haven't had a chance to PT. So if I don't run, it doesn't loosen the back muscles and I get really stiff. So I'm a little bit sore today, but.
Well, listen, MCPON, I think what you just started on is actually going to be a pretty awesome segue here. I believe you've heard of a young lady that has been a leader in our Navy for some time, Joanne Ortloff.
Yeah, I've heard of her.
You heard of her? All right, well, guess what? She is going to be joining us here right now. And I think it's a great segue because you were talking about how to lead and change. And what better segue than to have Joanne kind of kick off and meet you virtually here as well and kick things off. So great timing.
Do you mind if I finish out with something? Because I do have to.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just thought it'd be great for you to be able to meet Joanne here as we turn over.
Sure. No, it's an also a good segue for me to talk about one of the things that we're doing in Leadership Mess. And I know that the predominant audience here are not command mast chiefs, but when you look at the composition of the Navy, about 26-27% female. When you get in the chief's mess, that number drops to about 9%. Not necessarily representative of the whole, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Some are cultural. It's not necessarily one of explicit advantage, but there are things that we've done like SIP, the Career and Mission Program, and things that have helped us address what women say in exit surveys or some of the issues that prevent, longevity in service. But when you get to the Master Chief ranks, women make up about 3%. And at one point when we had 3 of 4 fleet Master Chiefs were female, all of us were high-fiving each other and saying, hey, we got it done. This vision that started, really with MCPON West to build a leadership mess that looked more and was more reflective of our Navy population. The thing we realized a little too late was it requires constant grooming. You have to continue because that population, that pool of women leaders is so small. You have to groom and provide the opportunity for those women that you have to demonstrate their skills and capabilities. And when they're found capable, you move them into those jobs. We've had lots of examples where someone hasn't been selected or put into a job, and often it's the detailing process that never gave them the opportunity to demonstrate proficiency in a way that would allow those skills to be seen. The directed talent management that we're doing now with the flag serving CMC cohort is designed to ensure that we don't miss anybody because someone has never heard of them or doesn't know them or hasn't been in their circle. But then we realized, well, if you haven't been working for an 06 and had a chance to demonstrate that proficiency at that level, you're probably not going to get selected up into that pool. So we look at how we detail into those jobs and ensure that if all things are equal and I've got 2 candidates, or I have someone who may not be less known but has a far more impressive resume, why would I not empower and give opportunity to that female leader so that they have the opportunity to show us, do you have what it takes or not? And if you do, let's move you up, because what we have to do is increase the population of senior CMCs, because if you look up and you see an organization that doesn't look like you, you're not going to feel like there's any place for you in it. And so we are more diverse even than American society in our military ranks at the top, with the glaring exception of gender. So that's been one of my, as I say, we're prioritizing talent. That's exactly what we're doing. I'm not necessarily prioritizing towards gender, but I'm not going to allow that talent that we have that are women walk away from the organization because they don't feel like it looks like them or there's a place for them. And so we've gone from about 3 in the leadership mess when I took over to about 9 now. I have to go back and look and see where we're at today, but it's improving, but we got work to do. And there are a lot of talented men and women out there. And we're doing a far better job today by informing when and where we put people. It's not about who you know or what admiral may be aware of you or not. It's about what sort of talent you have, what the board process recommends, and then what the G5 will then push to the admiral for the admiral to select from.
That's awesome. Mick
So
Pond,
hopefully we will have another fleet behind Ortloff shortly to follow.
Mick Pond, that's amazing. I can't thank you for your, I cannot thank you enough for your time. You know, I know it's valuable. And I got to say, I've always said you should guard 2 things with your life: your time and your reputation. And the fact that you carved out a little time for us, your reputation precedes you, and just keep doing great things for our country and our Navy.
Thanks. Hey, by the way, if you didn't notice, both myself and Sino are sporting the colors representing the entire Chiefs mess.
That's what I'm talking about, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. The greatest fraternity in the world, is it not?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, Mick Pond, thank you so much for your time. And that's a great segue into Joanne, who's also an amazing leader in her own right, doing great things both in the Navy and out. Mick Pond, if you're welcome to stick around as long as you want.
In about 6 minutes, I got to hop off here, actually.
Thanks, Mick Pond. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.
It's good to see you, Mick Pond, and I'm glad you're in the seat.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for putting this on, all of you.
You got it. Thanks, man. Appreciate you.